The following presentation was recorded live for the International Association of Square Dance Callers 19th Annual Convention. We take you live to Virginia Beach, Virginia, where our session is just getting underway.
Well, welcome. Welcome to our Smoothness workshop. Today, this afternoon, this is actually going to be a working session, unlike some of the ones that we've had where we've been just preaching at you. We probably will do some preaching at you too and hope to share some of the things we've found, but we hope to be able to find out some new facts about what's going on in the way of smoothness. We're hoping to learn today too, and we're going to try and make it a working session. And we're planning to have fun. Hope you guys do also. I didn't realize Gregg was bringing this music, but that's fun music to begin with. That's going to keep us on our toes. Before we get started, we have started already. I guess what I would like to do first is introduce the panel that's up here with me. On my left is a gentleman that many of you have seen give other interest sessions at CALLERLAB, and even though it is almost April 15th, this is not the income tax session. We are talking about smoothness. This is a gentleman from Colorado whom I first met in 1969 and is on the Board of Governors of Colorado, as you know, and has lots of other credentials that we won't waste time with at this point. Other than one, he's a good friend and has been since '69. I'd like to introduce Gregg Anderson. Was it 69? I can never remember. 68, 70, something like that. To his left and also to my left is a gentleman who's also on the Board of Governors, and I've known a little longer than Gregg and considered a friend since then. Since 1967, let's have a hand for Jim Mayo. And to their right is somebody that I've known since no, we aren't going to talk about that. But yours truly is Don Beck, and I'm also on the Board of Governors and also here to moderate and be one of the participants of the workshop that we're going to do. The basic topic that we're going to be talking about today, it says Smoothness Workshop. Smoothness, I think many years ago people used to, and some possibly still do, associate the word smoothness or the thought of smoothness with body flow, of where you're going from one position to another in choreography. A lot of people have gotten together and done some thinking over the years and realized that for dancing to be smooth, it takes a lot more things than just good body flow. First of all, we talk about smooth dancing. How do you train your dancers to dance smoothly? Well, you don't really. What you do is you deliver your choreography, your calling, so that they will dance smoothly. They have no choice. What kind of factors go into making the dance smooth? Body flow is one. One of the considerations is something called overflow. One of the things is hand availability. Timing, something that we've had separate committees working on and had a demonstration at lunchtime it was. Phrasing, tempo, speed of the music, the beat of the music. The dancer's ability. I just said that you can't train dancers to dance smoothly that you, I just lost my concentration. I was listening to the laughter over there. If you guys feel like laughing when they do, go ahead and chime in with them.
You can't train the dancers smoothly.
Yes, right.
There's your training.
It's how you deliver the. Thank you. It's how you deliver the calls. However, I say one of the ingredients is dancer ability, because if they don't know the calls, if they've never heard of the calls, or if they haven't had adequate experience with the calls and being able to respond to them, they can't dance smoothly either. Choreographic difficulty, and I believe there's another session, maybe even at this hour on it, is one of the ingredients to making a dance go smoothly. Then there are perceived effects of smoothness, a function of the music that you use or the delivery voice that you use to go into smoothness. A lot more ingredients than just body flow that we used to think of. However, today, one of the things we're going to concentrate mostly on is body flow. That's one of the thoughts that we had. We will touch on some of the others. We've handed out a handout. That's what you do with handouts. And it has an outline of lots of ingredients that go into smoothness. And with a little bit more detail, we are not in any way going to have enough time in the hour and a half we have here to cover all of those subjects. We would love to. We'd love to take lots of time. We don't have it. We've handed them out, food for thought, things to look over afterwards. Some of you may want to follow along with some of the stuff we're doing. But it's really a large field of thought. One of the things when I say we're going to do a workshop here is we hope that not only are we going to talk about examples of things that are smooth and that aren't, but we want to experience it. We want to have some of you probably get up at some time and do some dancing. I know there's some things we plan to walk through that I'm in my mind torn as to whether they're smooth or not, whether the body flow's not, and I want to get down in a square and give it a try. You'll notice there's a large gap between the front row and the podium. That's intended so that we can get about 3 squares up to do that. The first question is, why do we care about smoothness? Is it important? Some callers think it is, some don't. Many pay lip service to it and don't know what it is. And I'm not going to handle that with a 10-foot pole. I'm going to hand that over to Gregg. Gregg, talk about smoothness for us a little.
And I'm just going to set the tone. I thought you'd enjoy hearing a portion of a session that the late Jack Lasry did at one point, and I'll play that for you now.
I've often asked some of the older people about this. I said, do you feel that I work you too hard? And I think the biggest compliment that I get personally as a square dance caller is not only that the people keep coming back at home and we can have a big square dance hall and they keep coming, is they said, Jack, when you call, we don't get tired. Now that has a lot to do with timing and being on the beat and giving them enough time and forward motion and flow. They said, we don't even know the time has gone by. And this to me I like this. This to me is, I pat myself on the back, so to speak, when they tell me this, because I know that I can call a little bit longer and they won't get fed up with me.
We'll kind of cover a lot of the details that go to make up what causes the dancers not to get tired, but I thought you would enjoy that little segment, and even put the comment on the outline, I could have danced all night, and that's kind of the feeling of the dancer who's experiencing a smooth dancing experience. Effortless dancing does not get tired, just like Jack says.
One of the things that I did want to throw in, we've got a few flow sequences, combinations of calls and things that we've found, and many of you I'm sure have, that don't work very well together. Others that are borderline and may require judgment, and others that we're just starting to realize don't look as good as they could, or aren't as good as we never really paid attention to them. What we're hoping you will do, and why I want to interject this while we're doing it here, is if any of you have things that you've seen other people use, or that you use and aren't sure about, or that come to mind as we're doing these demonstrations here, that you don't feel are good flow or aren't sure about. When we have a group up and are walking through some of these things, keep these in mind, jot them down mentally or physically, and we may end up using some of these also. This is what we want. It is a working session.
One of those, and I'm going to throw in another segment here from Jack Lasry, because one of the things that you get into in an analysis of, especially a technical analysis of smoothness in choreography, has to do with the knowledge of the body flow of the various figures themselves. Here again we have Jack, and he's going to be talking.
But no matter what you do after a walk and dodge, it's going to be unsmooth for somebody, except the boys fold. Because if you partner trade, the girl has slid right, and now she's got to come back underneath, right? If you do a tag, a partner tag, it's the same way. If you do a bend the line, it's good for half the square, it's lousy for the other half the square. So the only personal thing, if you do a run, the girl still has to slide back over where the boy is. At least a fold, the girl can stay where she is, and the boy comes to her. Boys fold.
So there's a sequence, there's a technical way to approach it, and there's also experience and smoothness in calling that just comes from an unconscious experience like this gentleman here. That's okay. Oh, yeah, you bet. That was I just cruised right into that.
Now the girls circulate once, balance there, left swing through, and the girls circulate twice. Boys
probably recognize Marshall Flippo.
Once, left Alabama, left and here we go, let's grand, go round, let's go round.
Unconscious effort, born of experience. You've danced to Marshall before, probably, and smoothness. So there's the two extremes. There's the one extreme where you've got a Jack Lazary and talking about details, which we will get into here this afternoon, and you've got other areas of just what I call unconscious delivery or unconscious items born of experience. Unconscious delivery. No, that's not too good, is it? If you're unconscious, you can't deliver too well. Wait till you see him, yes. I'm going to get rid of this microphone before I say something foolish again.
Got to keep him entertained somehow, Gregg. I'd like to turn the mic over now, or let Jim use his own mic, actually. Jim's going to fill you in on a little of the background of what's gone before this session and what we hope may be a route that will help direct this session on. Jim?
I don't know how this microphone works. Can you all hear successfully? Good. I think I have to stay fairly far away from it. One of the things that CALLERLAB does very well is to bring us together to think in new ways and to work together to learn about square dancing. And many years ago, I just looked up the date, and it was 1976. Ron Schneider was asked to give a talk on smoothness at the CALLERLAB convention. And Ron started his talk by saying, I've done a lot of research, and I can find nothing written on the subject of smoothness from a caller's perspective. I found that rather amazing, and I got the job of delivering that talk the next year. I came running to Don Beck and said, Don, we got to do some research. We got to go find out how this works. And so we did. We gathered together a group of dancers, some very experienced dancers, and other callers. Don had a hall that we could use, and we got together shortly after noon on a Sunday, and near midnight we were still there, experimenting with smoothness, trying out the things that we thought had an impact. There were in those days very clear directions that you never use the same hand twice in a row. We were using star through, which necessarily violates that. We had seen scoot back become popular, which clearly used the same hand 3 times in a row, and we said to ourselves, there's got to be some other rule that applies, because these are successful. Why? We spent the whole day experimenting and discovered many things. I think that the word overflow was reinforced there. Don tells me that Clark Baker had invented it when he was doing his thesis research at MIT. We discovered a lot of things. One of the understandings that came out of that session was the concept of hand availability rather than recent hand use. The question is not have you just used the hand, but is it available for what you want to do next with it? After star through, the gentleman's right hand is exactly where it needs to be to start a right and left through. We didn't know that then. That experimental session taught us a great deal, and out of it I wrote the first thing that's, and I think one of the few things that's been written on smoothness. We didn't learn it all that day by any means, but we learned a great deal, and it was out of that we began to change some of the traditional statements that had been made, and we gained a great deal of new understanding. One of the things we discovered, to our considerable surprise that day, was the importance of the interaction between timing and body flow in making things smooth. As an illustration of that, the example that Gregg just gave you of walk and dodge, the only smooth thing that can follow it is a partner tray, as a boy's fold. That's not, in my view, currently true. If you give the command in time, the expectation of the girls that they will do what is commonly done in round dancing as a basketball turn will make that into a quite comfortable action. We discovered in that experimental session that the call head star through and square through 3/4 left the head couples offset to the wrong side of the sides for the allemande left, which traditionally or commonly follows. How do we fix that? By watching carefully, we discovered that all dancers, experienced dancers, rotate to the right to bring those two left hands together. That was new information to us then. If you are going to call a do-sa-do, you need to beat that anticipation by giving the do-sa-do command earlier, so the dancers know that they should not anticipate the left allemande, which they will normally do. And thereby we came to the realization that anticipation, expectation, was an important part of smoothness. All of these things came out of a workshop, an experimental session that we had that taught us a great deal. And this session, we hope, will become an extension of that, because so far as I know, there's been very little experimentation since. This is a place for CALLERLAB to bring together
that experienced dancers so many times, I think, take for granted. To my way of thinking, and probably because of the way that I was brought up in my calling and dancing in the early years, to me, I firmly believe that it adds to the enjoyment. And you can take it to the furthest spectrum of the age group. Many of you callers probably work with senior citizen groups, whether it's in the retirement communities or in your own community. And as I get older, I appreciate more comments that I get from dancers who have had hip surgery or who currently have bursitis or whatever, that smooth dancing certainly appeals to them more than some of the antics that we all see and have seen on the square dance floor. And it becomes not only a matter of enjoying it more, but enjoying it, period, if you can have smooth dancing. And the caller, in many ways, can lend toward the smooth dancing. There's also times when the caller does his very best. The caller analyzes things like Jim has mentioned and works diligently to cover many of the areas that Don briefly mentioned at the beginning and that we will talk about in detail during this session, only to have someone whom I refer to either as a pogo stick dancer or things that go bump in the night out there on the floor, totally destroying every bit of smoothness that you were trying to interject into the program. So there are going to be times when you're going to be defeated anyway, despite the great amount of effort that you might try to put into it. Before we get into body flow and some of the other detailed aspects in just a few moments, Jim mentioned the proper timing of the command in order to allow for that square through 3/4 to a whatever following that. That the timing of the command is going to be critical. Their selection of music, I think, has a great bearing on the smoothness. The fact that you may be doing a workshop tip as opposed to just a dancing tip where, and I've heard the expression where the dancers have wind in their face, will have some bearing on the type of music, and the music can help in the overall smoothness success of your delivery and of the dancer's experience. The ability to put yourselves mentally, or if we do exercises physically, in the position of a person of the opposite sex so that you can appreciate what the particular choreography accomplishes and feels like from their viewpoint. So that has a very important aspect on it too. And I think those are some of the areas other than the technical aspects of it, and we'll talk a little bit later as time permits to talk about some of the perceived aspects of smoothness, but I'll let Don get on with some of the more detailed points at this time.
One of the other things that comes to mind about smoothness is that some callers really are concerned that the dancing is smooth. Others aren't as concerned and yet are very successful callers. And it's a judgment call as to where you want to stress, whether you want to stress the smoothness in the dancing experience or the choreographic complexity and puzzle solving, which some people do. And there's some that try and do both. But an interesting, but if you do a real stop and go, stop and wait until this happens and then stop and go until that happens, and, check your diamonds, check your whatever you've got. You can get dancers through an awful lot more mechanics of funny choreography than you probably can smoothly dancing through it. But it's not as good a dancing experience. An interesting thing, though, and one of the things I found when I started working on better body flow and better timing, was that I could get dancers, in fact, through more difficult choreography than I could before. Because once they learned to trust me, they kept moving forward and alternating hands. And the next call, if they were heading this way, the next call was going to start that way. They knew if they were heading there, they didn't have to hesitate and pull back and switch hands and what have you. You build a trust and a working relationship with your dancers, and you can, in fact, get through a bit more interesting stuff, interesting choreographically.
Let me interject one thing there, Don, and this is not to say that every tip that you do for every dance should be what we're going to define in this hour and a half as being smooth. There are valid reasons for departing from the smoothness concept. If you want to throw in certain types of either gimmicky things or things that are extremely unusual and directional positioning that will result in a stop-and-go type of movement on the part of the dancer, there's nothing wrong with that if that is a valid part of your program and if you recognize that you may indeed be giving up on a certain amount of smoothness to accomplish that.
Let me also express my strong prejudice that we have, over the past decade, overemphasized choreographic complexity in our square dance activity at the expense of the sensation of dancing. And I believe that we have thereby given away half of the appeal that we have to offer. We've failed to sell half of our product. I think that we could do a great deal to retain some of the people that might go away if we offered more dancing, even if it sometimes was at the expense of complex choreography.
One of the things of many well-intentioned callers where they tend to still miss the boat on smoothness is by following only the active dancers and missing what the inactive dancers are doing. By following only the men and missing what the women are doing. There was something else that they tend to do. Oh, by seeing what the notes here indicate the left side dancer does versus what the right side dancer does. One of the things that workshop that Jim mentioned that I remember particularly, some callers were saying star through and veer to the left was a very bad body flow combination. I had been using it and was defending it. So what we did was we got out there and did a star through and veer to the left, and I walked through it to see how it felt. I walked through it from the man's position, which most people will agree is good. I walked through from the women's position, which most people will agree is questionable. And I walked both parts. Due to pre-timing enough on the woman's part, with the call, Jim says timing is a part of the relationship of that, I found that was quite acceptable, although borderline, but acceptable on occasion. You have something in mind?
I was just going to say, both these gentlemen have programmed a lot of things that we can best show by demonstration, and we realize this is being taped, so we will do our utmost to describe things that are being taped. Could we please get a couple squares up here in front so that we can actually show some examples done to music?
I was just going to get to that. One of the things, if you don't mind me going, we have mostly men in here today, and that's good.
Good.
One, as I just said, in the star through veer to the left, I danced the man's part, then I danced the woman's part to get a feel for what both parts are like. And we have mostly men here. I don't mind if women get up also. In fact, the more of you feeling it, the better. And I think we have room for 3 squares.
Every male caller should dance the woman's part regularly.
And this will give you a feeling of both parts or either part. And I think it's a good thing that we have this. Look, can we get 3 squares up?
You can't walk. You got to make them dance at 3.
Can we get 3 squares up? Can we talk this square in front of me over here to moving over to the side a bit to make room for this other square? I know the floor is downhill and you're going to squeeze them out eventually, but...
One person on the left. Coming. We got him.
You guys are a charming looking group, yeah.
All right, here we go. Don?
You know, I would rather do this without music. What I would like to... I'm going to just very quickly walk you through one or two relatively smooth sequences, and then show you a couple of you know, the classic that most of us know, bad things. Let's have the head. This should be relatively smooth. Head square through, please. I should have written something down. Do-sa-do. They all did it properly. Great. Do a swing through. Centers run. That's the original men, right? Do a Ferris wheel. Centers do a right and left through. Do-sa-do. So you're facing them again and square through 3/4. Find your corner, do an Alaman left. Square your sets. One of the things that you might feel, and particularly the rest of you acting as callers watching this, try not to listen to the calls. Try just to watch the action, and you'll almost see a kaleidoscope kind of thing of everything falling into place in a nice symmetric kind of action. Not this call, then that call, then that, but just a smooth one just moves next. The people are dancing. We happen to insert a few words in the process. Let me show you a couple of things that I think we all know are not particularly smooth. Let's have the sides square through 4 hands. Touch a quarter. Scoot back. I want you to let me know when it's bad. Men run. Past the ocean. Swing through. Men run. Bend the line. Flutter wheel. Freeze. Freeze right there. One of the things I want you guys to do, I'm asking the dancers, when I say freeze, please hold it as close as you can to that point. You're past it a little bit. That's okay.
If they missed it on the tape, at the bend the line flutter wheel is where we heard a groaning halt, didn't we, out there, Don?
Well, one of the things, we saw the groaning. The dancers were aware of it. I think the people watching were aware of it. One of the things that if you watch that kaleidoscope action, somebody bumped your shoulder, you know, and all the beads fell all over the place, and they weren't quite sure where to go. That's the kind of thing that you've got to look at as a caller. John? John Kaltenthaler from the back without a microphone wanted me to insert a comment. We didn't say that bend the line flutter wheel is a bad action. We showed that it was, and in this case it was because it was from a right-hand two-face line. If you do it from a left-hand two-face line, bend the line and flutter wheel is quite nice. I generally say when you've got a lemon, make lemonade, and I frequently show a number of things that typically people think of as bad that can be good if done properly.
And to be more specific for our listening audience, in normal facing couples, after we completed the bend the line, the people in the ladies' position were backing up with the bend the line, and then the flutter wheel would cause those same ladies to reverse direction of body flow to go in for the right arm turn, and that's where the problem came in that particular setup.
Could we have you square your sets?
Let's try.
Okay. Again, freeze when I ask you to, and we're aiming at something slightly different now. Let's have the head star through. Square through 3/4. Freeze. Right. Yeah, you're perfect. Jim was talking about one of the things that we noted about offsets, and I stood up so I can see it better. You guys hopefully will be able to see what you're doing. But notice the center men, if they were to walk straight ahead, would brush right shoulders with the side women. They're not lined up with them. Theoretically, if you're pushing your dolls, they would be facing them directly. But as a result of the action of this call, there is an offset. And the center women, raise your hands, women, so we know who you are, because you're not... No, that sounds like challenge. You're also slightly offset and almost facing the center of those two guys. You can drop your hand now if it's getting tired. One of the things that people used to say was you can't do two right-handed things in sequence, and after a square through four hands, your right hand is the hand that your next thing should be with, and a do-si-do they used to think was a right-handed thing, so you can't do a do-si-do after a square through four hands. But, as Jim said, we've gotten into thinking that it's not whether the hand has been used or have you, it's whether the hand is available or needed. The right hand is not needed for the do-si-do. This offset is already built in. So a do-si-do after here is very nice, because you're just sort of, all you got to do is go straight ahead. Do a do-si-do. Back out and square your set. Now, head star through. Square through 3/4. Freeze. You're just about that same point. How many of you ever call Alaman left after a square through 3/4 in there?
Never.
Only one hand. How can we wake the rest of these people up? They're all liars. How can you I do. How can you call an Alaman left when the body offset is as bad as it is here? Well, dancers know it's coming. If the centers and the others would all just turn to the right about an eighth of a turn or slightly less. Notice how those left arms, stick your left hand straight out, it's right there. They don't have to move very much. The offset is just the turning corrects it. Do an Alaman left. Go back and square your set, and we'll try it again without the pause, and we'll see how it works quite smoothly. Head star through. You're getting good at that, guys. Square through 3/4. And with your corner Alaman left. Notice even the outside people know that they're part of it. Square your sets.
So it's a slight body rotation built in because the caller provided enough pre-advance warning to the dancers with his calling.
May I show the alternative? Side couples, would you star through and square through 3/4? Then do-si-do. Did you feel the adjustment? You were expecting the rotation. You were starting it. I delayed the call until you were ready to anticipate that rotation. When I called a do-si-do, you had to unanticipate and get back again. That's my message on timing, is that command, if you're going to do other than the expected Alaman left, should come earlier, so that the dancers have time to expect the do-si-do rather than the Alaman left that they would normally expect. It's an adjustment of about a half a second in the placement of that command. One beat. But it's important. I would like to square them up, just unpair off. Thank you.
That'll be the next quarterly.
At what level?
Yet to be determined.
Undoing a call, I find a very useful training aid. One of the calls that has been a surprise to me, and this awareness came to me through Gloria Roth. She's a big fan of kinesiology. And in discussing that, we talked about the call square through. You've all encountered the problem of the men on the second hand of the square through continuing a left-hand rotation into a courtesy turn. Very common occurrence. The nature of the square through call almost forces that, because most of our dancers, in doing a square through, hold on to the hand until after they've gone by each other. If you do that, you find that on alternating hands, first the ladies and then the men, are pulled away from the placement for their next step. Heads, would you take a right hand starting a square through and hold on a little beyond and then freeze? Notice that pull is, for the ladies, away from the direction that they must go for the next action. Now, take the second hand, hold on a little bit and walk by. Notice that pull pulls the men away from the direction they need to go for the next action. In fact, it pulls them almost into the rotation of a courtesy turn. That's the inherent nature of square through. In teaching square through, you will help your dancers considerably if you tell them to touch and walk by, but not to hold on as they pass each other. because that hold pulls people away from the direction that they should be turning. That same action means that the square through 3/4. Heads, would you get back to home place, I guess, is what I really want. And now pair off, step up to the center and face your corner, that is, and star through. Remember which of you are men and which are women. Now, square through 3/4. And hold on, right there. If the next call is Allemande left, notice that all of the women have been pulled away from the direction of that Allemande left. In order to get to it, they must turn back from the way they have been pulled. Same thing is true if the next call is swing. Perfectly comfortable for the men. They are being pulled toward that next action. But the women are not. There are problems with square through inherent to the action. Think carefully about what action follows square through. It's not as flexible a call as we have given it credit for being. Thank you.
Can you square your sets again? Whenever I do a teaching callers, a seminar or something, to work with people to show things like this, they prove out a very interesting point, and that dancers can adapt quickly and make things look good and make things look smooth, even when they're not. First of all, I would like to compliment you guys. When we said freeze, not only did you, but all 3 squares were at the same point. I've often wondered in a hall when I'm calling, when I say head square through 4, this square will start, and then that one, and maybe that one will eventually, and then that one will over there. And why does my
good timing that makes that happen?
My timing, I still haven't figured out, Jim, and you're my coach, so tell me, when I start a sequence by saying head square through 4 at the very beginning, and they haven't done anything yet, how is my timing different from one square to the next?
It differs in their awareness of their familiarity with the choreography. If you call something that they expect, that's common, that's routine for them, they will in fact all step off at the same time. If your opening statement is something that makes them think, you will find delays in their start by the amount of thinking time it takes.
That's it. It's actually the thinking time.
And part of the thinking time is taken up by trying to figure out whether their heads or sides. And, I say that almost facetiously, but it has become so true today, and this is a slight deviation from the topic, but it's kind of important. For this reason, I would almost like us to see us do away with one of the traditions of square dancing, and that being stirring the bucket, because folks dance the entire patter tip as head couples or side couples. They rotate the set a quarter turn, you start the singing call, you get to the first figure, they say head couples, and they're standing there because they don't realize they've changed. And it was a nice tradition. I understand the tradition, but I think I get so frustrated for the dancer because I want them to succeed, and they can't even figure out if they're a head or a side. And yeah, the comment was made for the purpose of the tape, the same as using the designation of 1 and 3 or 2 and 4 do something, and this is a means of identifying that we probably as callers need to concentrate on mixing in more in our lessons and our dances of identifying dancers as 1st and 3rd or 2 and 4 so that they don't get accustomed to the heads and sides only, but we digress. Go back, Don.
Okay. I wanted to walk you guys through something that's a common mistake that many, many people do. And as a matter of fact, it slipped out of my mouth a few weeks ago, too. But I'm about to do a head square through 4 hands. And don't do it yet, please. And then star through. And this is a hand availability problem for the active women, the women in the center. After their 4th hand, the left hand that they have to use for a star through is behind them, and they have to whip it out front to the guy. When you call it, you won't even see the hesitation in the dancers anymore. Women have been beat on so badly with that, they've learned how to adjust. But I still want you to watch it. What I would like first is for the head women to raise your hands in the squares. Watch these people, watch their hands after the 4th hand, and watch that. That's the one that's coming from being tied up behind to having to do a star through. The outside women are fine. Both hands are available. Ready, go. Head start, square through. Sorry about that, square through. and then star through. Okay, hopefully you saw that.
We also saw it beautifully on that instant replay slow motion where that hand was coming down from below the waist level up and was very definitely difficult for those ladies coming out of the middle.
The next thing I want to do that I've got you here in lines, there's a call that theoretically should be fairly easy, but people have trouble. If I were to call, don't do it yet, but if I were to call pass through, wheel and deal, I suspect you would have no troubles. If I were to call square through 3/4, we all know that ends with lines facing out. If I were to call wheel and deal after that, you are going to have troubles. Same sex arrangement, same formation, but dancers have problems. Why is that more difficult than just a pass-through? And the answer is just what Jim was showing before. Theoretically, square through 3/4 has lines facing out when you're done. But in actuality, the offset of the square through, the turned bodies because of your hands being back after finishing that, puts your bodies out of position, and that line is only a theoretical line. It's not a real one. Let's try it and see what happens. Do a square through 3/4. And now wheel and deal. See how they smooth it out?
Yeah. Well, but you delayed the command. You let them stop in the line before you call the wheel.
Did I?
Yes.
Okay.
You gave them
First of all,
hesitation.
Jim says I gave you time to think with hesitation, and we're going to try it again without it. But I have a comment from one of the dancers, which is what I want.
You also have the man moving clockwise, and then all of a sudden he has to do a wheel and deal.
On one side and the other
Comment
side
was a man on one side moving clockwise, and then for the wheel and deal it has to change and go counterclockwise. Also, coming out of that square through, the man has his right hand down below his waist or near his waist, finishing the square through, has to release hand hold, take a hold of a hand of a person to become a couple for the wheel and deal action.
Can I test one of my pet peeves?
Yeah. We had one more comment on the feel of from a dancer here. The comment was that there's a failure on dancers to touch hands and form those lines. And yes, there is, and not all the dancers teach that. And that does help dancers to get through more difficult choreography. But it's not necessarily smooth, doesn't make the dancing any smoother. It helps them get through the stuff that we create that's not as smooth as it could be.
This is an experiment.
Go.
Double pass through. Heel off. Bend the line. Star through. Double pass through and the leader's trade. Swing through. Center's run. A Ferris wheel. Double pass through. Leader's trade. Fine. I'd like your opinion on that leader's trade. It's very commonly used. My personal observation says it always produces an uncomfortable hesitation for the trailing dancers. What's your opinion as dancers? You have to stop and wait while they do that. Usually when we stop in square dancing, we're holding on to somebody. That time we're not.
Dan?
It's something I'm used to doing, but I've always felt a little bit hiccupy.
Comment being it's something he's used to doing, but felt a little bit of hiccuping.
It's become quite common. There's no doubt of that.
Yeah, the consensus seems, for most people, is they're used to doing it. They don't mind. They heard the term leaders, so the trailers were ready to stop. I've got to admit it's something that I hadn't considered until Jim and I started talking a little bit before this. And you guys did it smoothly, and I'm not convinced that I'm going to stop. And we've talked, a lot of these things are borderline, make your own decision, but be aware that how you're pushing it.
And the pattern that Jim used on that, too, required good timing of his delivery, because the first time through the double pass through, he did a peel off, which had an action turning in one direction. After another double pass through, he did the leader's partner trade, which had a different direction of the body flow. Had he not given that command in the proper timing, there's no way, because of dancer anticipation, that it could have been smooth.
timing also helps it be less hiccupy than I have experienced.
Comment from the floor being the timing helped to be less hiccupy than he had experienced in the
We had a
past.
comment over here next.
But
the other thing that I always feel that if I'm going to do a partner trade after a double pass through, that call comes before they even almost never get there, because they're already in the flow or thinking about it by the time they come around. Why, you're there, and the other ones are there. So to me, if you're thinking about doing it, give it far enough in advance.
Yes, that certainly is critical. If you don't give it far enough in advance, you're guaranteed discomfort.
The first call, when you had the double pass through, and then the peel off, it was a very, very comfortable move from there to the bend the line. Beautiful on the lady's standpoint.
And it looked very nice, too. Another thing, we have another comment. Mal?
Come up so you can get it on mic. We need to be sure that the people who get
We've
the tip
got
have some idea what's happening
This
here.
is what we want.
We had a suggestion from one of the dancers out here of another sequence that I'd like you to try. And again, I kind of like to do these things without telling you what the test is, so that you dance them naturally. Can you make me a little music?
Make music. I got one of these things here that might help.
Swing through. Centers run, and couples circulate. Chain down the line. Pass an ocean. Swing through. Centers run. Couples circulate. Chain down the line. Fine. Did you find anything in there that was uncomfortable?
Could have been couples circulate and a chain down the line for the men. Could have been, depending on the timing.
Paul?
I think the man is a little uncomfortable because he has to kind of turn back to get the girl's left hand in courtesy turner.
It looked like a full three-quarter rotation for some of those men.
Also, if the man circulating on the outside, if the caller hesitates 1 second too long, he's already past the point. He has to back up and turn.
The couple facing out, when you call that, I think is a problem. When you on the circulating chain down the line, those facing in, I think, is where the problem comes in.
One of the things that Gregg had added to the input that I put into the handout were things used to reverse direction to help fight overflow on occasion, and I think almost that men's position is kind of worthwhile in there.
Where he used that particular call as in swap around. It's inherent that a certain amount of backup will happen.
One of the things that I noticed while Jim was walking through that's something that I think about on occasion. I'm not sure why it happens fully, but let's take a look at it. Do it past the ocean. We're going to do pretty much what he did again before. Sort of swing through, men run, freeze. Now, ladies, some of you step backwards after the freeze to join right hands. Undo that little step backward. This line over here is actually the way it was after the men run. Frequently, callers will call chain down the line after a men run. More often than that, callers will call women hinge to create diamonds. Notice how those two women, raise your hands so we know who we're looking at. Just these two over here, Dan and the man in yellow, because they froze exactly when I wanted. They're offset. They've got to back up to do a lady's join right hands to either trade or chain down the line. The rest of you automatically went back and took hands because you know that's what you're trained to do, that kind of thing. You were starting to. We're going to take another quick look at that. We'll do it again. But that offset makes a chain down the line or a lady's hinge very awkward. Women have learned to adapt to it. Theoretically, that shouldn't happen. But I was watching this time, because this is a workshop and I've never taken time to look at it since I've been worried, that the reason it happened was when the men run, the women tend to step forward to help them to get out of their way. It's not part of the call, but they were doing that. And that's what got them into it. Do it, bend the line. and a right and left through. Past the ocean. Watch it again. Swing through. Men run. Freeze. See how the women are stepping forward as the guys are going around? And now...
Comment was it's because of the full skirts.
And so there's an offset with a chain down the line or a ladies trade or ladies hinges. But maybe the other woman did. I don't know. Yeah. Maybe the other woman did. Right. I've always noted that, and I will frequently throw the couple circulate in before the chain down the line. You know, you can get away with it because dancers do it. And I too call ladies hinge, and I've never been sure why the offset, and now I see it. Most of you women's, whatever you guys are in the middle, have been stepping ahead. It makes for smoother dancing on the run, and I understand it. But do you all see that?
When we're looking at smoothness, it's very important for us to be aware of what the dancers actually do, because it does not always coincide exactly with what the description says that they do. This is a very neat example of it. I just had one other sequence or point suggested to me about the previous leaders trade action. Let me do that one more time. And again, I like to see it in an actual dancing mode. From here, we can do a Ferris wheel. Then a double pass through. Leaders trade. Freeze. Notice that the offset for the man for a swing through, no, I guess both of you are offset about right. The swing through is, you've moved over the right amount. No? Yeah, you walk right into it. I thought maybe that the closeness of the partner trade would put one of you...
The man has further to go on the partner trade, and it swings him around further to cause that offset, I think.
Mm-hmm. Okay, a do-sa-do, please. Then an 8-chain-4. And swing.
That's another point where...
You may promenade home if you wish.
If you held on the hand too long, you could be out of position.
I've got something I'd like to work through, but before that...
For the people who are listening to the tape, note that swing required the man person to move rather substantially to get the arm out from in back of this partner on the courtesy turn and get shifted back into position to start that swing. A much smoother way to proceed into getting your partner there is to do an 8-chain-5 to an Alaman left. Come back and promenade, or come back and swing.
Jim, you had an answer earlier, though, for the way the correct hand movement used to come to compensate for that.
All of us who danced 8-chain through over the years have learned that the way for the man to execute that courtesy turn is to remove the arm early and reach under the crossed arm to make it smooth. How many of us teach that to our students in class? Very important to do, because that's how we have made it smooth. If we expect them to do courtesy turns, we best teach them how to make those comfortable. Otherwise, we get what has happened, and that is that we throw away the courtesy turn on 8-chain through. It's uncomfortable. You got to come up here so we can hear the microphone, because you project well.
While John's coming up, another thing for the tape, why there was a little reaction on that swing your partner. A reminder, we have 3 squares dancing here. In those 3 squares, there are 3 women only, and the rest are all men, and some of the swinging was a lot of fun that way. And of the 3 women we have, 2 of them are dancing in the man's position.
The thing I want to point out on that, the number of singing calls that have a do-sa-do and 8-chain-4 is disgusting. The timing is identical if you do an 8-chain-5, Alaman left, come back and promenade. Why do we have the hesitancy to change the singing call? Because the guy recorded it? Ridiculous. Let's think of the dancer first. Success by design.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Oh.
All right, John. Thank you.
Before we go on to the next example, you guys have been up for a while. Do you guys want to take a break and let some other people get up and dance? Or if anybody else wants to come up and dance and get the feel, we've got one up here. Come on up.
I'm compelled, based on what John...
We do want 3 squares, and if you guys...
Based on John's comment that John just made, I'm compelled to make an observation about the chain down the line.
with the chain down the line, when we did a ladies' trade, why couldn't we do a cast-off three-quarters? We always had that. Why did we need to create another new movement that put us in the same position, everything the same, from a right-handed two-face line?
Do you really want to know? Since I was the one that wrote Chain Down the Line, or let me, for the record, adapted the traditional figure of Chain Down the Line to modern choreography, I did that because for years I was trying to get dancers to do a ladies' trade and cast off three-quarters. I thought it was a beautiful move, and I couldn't get them to dance it because as much as it was common kind of sense, it didn't happen. So I told the guys to courtesy turn, and they made it into a call because it was a nice move. It still is if you can, but I couldn't get the average dancer to do it because they don't seem to accept that as standard choreography. If you can get away with it, I think it's great. If you use ladies' trade, bend the line like many people do, it's horrible, horrible flow. Yep. Yep. Good observation, though. Darn you. What? His comment was, why do we really need a new name for center's trade and then cast three-quarters? Why did we call it Chain Down the Line? When we could have called center's trade and cast off three-quarters. And the answer was we couldn't call it. Or we could, but they didn't dance it.
Well, I'm a new caller, and I teach Chain Down the Line, but what I wanted was an explanation as far as smoothness, because that's why we're here. When the girls circulate, then basically, by my mind, what you're asking them to do is stop, turn, and almost do a lady's chain. And I can't see the smoothness for a woman in that particular call.
My sense is that they do not, in fact, stop. That what they do is trade. They move. They continue to make an arc through a ladies' trade action into a courtesy turn. They don't stop and then move sideways. They meet each other and rotate half. Okay. And then continue a reverse rotation in the courtesy turn.
Now, what I would like is for you to take one of the women's positions in this square, and we'll walk you through it.
By all means.
The reverse rotation is going to come from the lady circulating across the set.
Are you more concerned about the woman coming across or the woman that's been standing waiting?
The woman coming across.
Okay. Let's have the heads half square through. Swing through. Men run, couples circulate, chain down the line. You did stop, yes. Did it feel okay? I called it slightly late, but the others seem to go fine into it.
And reverse rotation is not bad. When properly timed, reverse rotation can break up those overflow moments.
It's an S turn.
An S turn, as Jim has pointed out, with things like right and left through, chain down the line, Dixie style to an ocean wave, reverse flutter wheel, those types of movements in the opposite direction of what we normally think of, the kinds of things, swing through, boys run, couples circulate, wheel and deal, etc., that lead into an overflow normally in a clockwise direction. These kinds of S-curve movements put on the end of those can change that overflow and bring back a more smooth feeling to the choreography.
Dancing is body movement set to music, and you've got to have a certain amount of body movement. You can't just have it all plain old vanilla. It may be awfully smooth to just walk straight ahead and do nothing else, but there's not much dancing to it. And so a little bit, as long as it's not too abrupt and not awful, is acceptable.
Let me show another one of those rotational things where the natural continuation of the rotation causes trouble. Would you right and left through? And then swing through. Notice that the women have to stop that rotation in order to get into the swing through. Centers run and bend the line. And reverse the flutter.
For the tape, there's a lot of groaning out there. Some of it is because with three squares it's a little tight and there's not much room.
But notice that anytime you have a courtesy turn, to expect a straightforward action to follow it requires, again, the women are rotating, ready to meet each other with the right hand. A lady's chain following a right and left through, or any courtesy turn, is very comfortable. To do a swing through requires those women to stop the rotation and straighten it out. And that often tends to be a problem. if you really want to create the problem, have a right and left through followed by a spin the top. Doesn't happen. The women will meet right hands almost every time because they are rotating to put the right hands together, and they don't stop the rotation quick enough.
Backing up when you're doing a right and left through, the man. When you're doing a right and left through, the man is backing up, and then you call it a swing through, which he has to then go forward.
Yeah, he fails for a different reason.
Oh, I see. All right.
One of the things while we were talking about this seminar over the last few months is Jim was showing some examples of things that he had pet peeves against. And one of them was one of the things that I had never observed and never noticed, and I guess I would like to walk you guys through. He just did partly, but after a courtesy turn, his concern is that the man's left hand is behind the woman, his right hand is behind the woman, and not available to do a right-handed thing. Could you square your sets? Because I'm going to, first of all, walk you through something that I probably do frequently, and then walk you through one thing. I'll tell you about it in a second. Let's have the head square through.
Yeah, they'll fix it if you want.
Do a right and left through. Swing through. Okay, guys, you pulled your right hands out. You had it behind. Maybe it's the principle of the fact that you've done it so often that you're getting good at it. Let's have the men run. Do a Ferris wheel. And a right and a left through. Now pass through and a right and a left through. Here we go again. Swing through. Boy run. Ferris wheel. Star through. Any comments on whether that right hand is there? Guys, they're saying no problem here. Get used to it. Okay. Go ahead.
You're moving to the left as a body, and your hand comes out almost at the same time your body does, and it's right there.
That's why this is a workshop.
I have been watching, or sometimes, not so much when I'm calling and worried about choreography, because there are an awful lot of right-hand movements we're likely to do after a courtesy turn. Let me give you a good example at beginner's class. Let's have the head ladies chain. And heads do a right and left through. Right? How many times have you done that?
Many.
Let me show you something, though, that since I've been watching this when I haven't had to call, this noontime we had a demonstration of timing up in front of the hall or the side of it when we had ever found what direction it was coming from. The sound was coming from up there. And I saw something that looked awkward to me, and it was doing something after a right and left through, namely a dive through. It looked quite awkward. Let's see what that looks like. And we've done that a number of times, haven't we? Until we finally teach him pass through, trade by. Head square through. Do a right and left through. Dive through.
Here I go. They avoid the problem completely.
There's still some offsets for the guys coming through. And, yeah, the arch, there's letting go. But it still looked kind of awkward. We've got a comment here.
I've noticed two things in watching dancers dance that I see more and more of now, and they're not using hands as much on the courtesy turns. Number one, you'll see the man and the lady take their hand and come around. And number two, on the dive-throughs, they don't even try it anymore. They just drop their arms and walk around because they don't want to get involved in it.
You know, I condone that to some extent when I teach my dancers after I've taught them dive-through. I say, you know, sometimes we have some very tall people diving and some very short people arching. What I want you to do is make the arch. If you have to, let go of it and keep a symbolic arch and rejoin immediately afterwards so that we don't...
My approach is to use pass to the center, which I find is replacing dive through to a great extent.
Yeah, people are actually getting so they can dance it up in your area.
Could we form the head couples at home again, please? We had talked earlier about Dixie style to an ocean wave as being a way to change the rotation, or as being something that flows naturally from something like this. 1 and 3, do a right or left through, turn the lady, head ladies lead, do the Dixie style, make an ocean wave right there. Do a left, swing through. Right. Stop the music, would. we have done one thing. We've led from a courtesy turn type action on the end of the right and left through into the Dixie style. That part was fine, but what did we do right after the Dixie style ocean? We did a left swing through, which was bad, and the reason it was bad, we had the men coming into the middle of the left-handed ocean wave. They're already turning a lady by the left, immediately using the left hand again. Much better would have been when the men come into the middle, do some action in the middle, a fan the top, a boy's trade, anything that has the centers of that newly formed wave doing some action of some type to set up a better flow. The most popular, I said, was trade the wave. At a plus dance, yes. Yeah, center straight. Anything that has some action for those newly formed centers. So, although, well, I think I don't need to belabor it. We saw the point, and everybody realized, especially the ones that were dancing immediately when I said left swing through, they knew immediately what the problem was.
We've got a few other examples we could walk through, but I think maybe you guys are, why don't you guys sit down for a while and want to hear some, thank you.
For the purposes of the tape and those in the audience, the patter record that we were using was hi-hats topper off. 656 is the number. That's hi-hat topper off.
We got appreciative comments from the dancers because we did not call Yellow Rock.
Did you want to say something? Yep. Gregg's going to have some, as I say, this courtesy turn and right-hand thing afterwards is stuff that came up when in talking to Jim, and that I wanted to see what happened. Some of the things that I had not thought about relative to smoothness, but I guess I was aware of, I just hadn't thought of grouping it with all the things that affect smoothness, like timing and hand availability and flow, was the effect of music on perception of smoothness. And that's something that Gregg and that I was made aware of by Gregg when we were talking on the phone, and he's got some things to try and educate me on with this, and possibly the rest of you. And
I've got some samples of music here, patter records and singing calls both. This particular one is a singing call on TNT called Row, 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 which I and many other callers use for a patter record. This is one that I would use for those points in time when I want the dancers to just drift with the music and have wind in the face. Walk around the corner, seesaw the partner, the men starve of the right. They're just moving along to the music. Nice, smooth flow to it. There's, in the singing call realm, one that I particularly like that is such a smooth feeling to it is on a Red Boot Star, and it's called My Life's a Dance. It's RBS 1300, if I'm reading the right line, an Anna Murray song that has just a lovely beat to it for a very nice, smooth flow. You don't want a lot of complicated choreography with one like this. Four ladies chain that ring. You roll away, circle after round again. Four ladies roll away, circle the ring. It's got such a nice beat to it, just a very smooth, crooning type of love song if you want it that way. Now, this doesn't mean that you are going to use records like that throughout the entire program, but records like that can create a sense of smoothness to help go along with the choreography. Another one that I like for a patter record that has been out for a while on Royal Records is CALLERLAB. And we've all used that. I like this one. I've got a 45-minute tape that I had made of this one to use for grand marches for one-night stands. Nice, smooth, wind-in-your-face music. So I think you get the point that there are types of music that you can use that help create that perception of smoothness. Also in the area of perceived smoothness, there's a singing call that Randy Doherty came out with on Lou Mac Records a while back. I'll go ahead and let Randy open up with this part of it. one called Fiddlin' Man that came out on Lumac Records.
Circle it. When the fiddling man came to town, sister started wearing her prettiest gown. Mama told her not to be hanging around that little good fiddling man. Walk around that corner, girl. Seesaw around you round.
And later on the record, if I can hit about the right spot.
Touch quarter boys running, then slide doing the swing. Swing that lady go round and you promenade. Late one night when the moon was low.
The point being on this one that many parts of that call are actually more like a chant. And the delivery of that particular song demands precise, smooth delivery. If you cannot deliver that with that particular singing call with smoothness, there is no point in even doing it, because that is one that has a smooth feeling about it that demands a smooth delivery. We got a hand in the audience? And as a patter record, you're right.
May I make an observation on your row?
Yes. Go ahead and pull it. This does make a good patter record.
One of the problems with using singing calls for patter is when you use ones the dancers know the words to. If they don't know the words, then the music takes over. But if they know the words, they expect to hear you sing them.
Yes, the number of Fiddlin' Man was on Lumac LM173. The Red Boot Star was My Life's a Dance. It was RBS 1300. There was, and maybe I have it available right here on this next sequence of tape if I've got it in the right order. To me, that's a two-step rhythm. I can just see someone doing a full box, two forward, two steps. Now, the tempo is a little off because just the way it's been taped on one machine and recorded on another. That is a fairly newly released patter record. And in the area of perceived smoothness, we all know that there are many singing calls out that have that feeling of a two-step to them. And that's fine. I've got some of those. I try not to put too many of those in one evening's program. But I really couldn't see the value of a patter record that had that kind of feeling to it, because it kind of fights my brain is trying to tell me to do a two-step, but I know I'm supposed to be cruising along doing square dance choreography. So I was a little surprised when I saw a patter record released with that kind of rhythm. And really, I think in the area of that is such a short sequence that we couldn't accomplish that. But those are just some of the thoughts that I have on perceived smoothness. That it is an area of there are all these technical things, but there are also the perceived kinds of things that enter into the picture as well.
We've got about 15 minutes left, and I would invite you in a moment to bring in some comments or see if these guys have any closing thoughts first. I do want to have one closing thought on mine. Something on smoothness, dancers dancing smoothly, that kaleidoscope look, where it's hard to tell where one call ends and the other begins. People just move nicely through the whole thing. It requires that body flow be right, that body offset be correct, that hand availability be correct, that timing be correct, and a number of other things. And if you don't recall what they are, the handout says it. The problem is they've all got to be correct for the dancing to be smooth. You mess up on any one of them, and you see with the hesitations and the stumbling and the giggles that we saw here. Frequently giggles of embarrassment when people make a mistake and have a problem, because they're blaming themselves and are embarrassed. It was really your fault the way you delivered it. That's an interesting but an important point. And unfortunately, dancers will blame themselves for your mistakes. I say unfortunately because they aren't going to have a good time, so they aren't going to come back, because they're going to blame you in the long run. But you've got to get all these things wrong. And if you start to become aware of it and start to look for that smooth feeling and then see little problems and make adjustments, that's when your real job comes in. I saw a glitch, a hesitation in their dancing, a stumbling. What did I mess up on? Was it body flow? Was it hand availability? Was it timing? Did I call something they don't know well enough to dance without more pre-warning yet? It's a lot of work to pull all these things apart. I would love to have the time, and I figure probably 4 days, 8 hours a day, to do a full workshop where you take each of these items and work with them one at a time and refine them and clean them up and then combine them all. It's a big subject, and we've just played with it for about an hour or an hour and a half. But the point I hope you guys remember, there are a lot of components to smoothness. They've all got to be right. If any of them go wrong, try and figure out which one, correct that, constantly be aware of it. Your dancers will love you all the more for it. You guys have any?
I'm sure we're preaching to the choir, because the fact that you're here indicates that you're interested in smoothness. Nevertheless, my observation, as I have had the opportunity at festivals and at caller clinics that I've done to observe dancing, suggests to me that there is much more roughness out there than we are willing to acknowledge. I would suggest that we have for years advocated that we should tape ourselves and listen to the tape and maybe even dance to it. I would suggest that the availability of videotape offers us a new opportunity to examine
the videotape. I don't have a camcorder, so I haven't been able to. But if you do have the opportunity to tape the dancers, play it back with the sound off. Just watch the movement. See if you can see them dancing or dancing a series of calls.
And then turn the sound on and see if you can figure out why.
Sorry to interrupt.
One of the things that you'll find is a useful guide, particularly for checking on timing, is to watch the skirts. Because when you have a timing hesitation, you'll see the skirts swing. And that will tell you that your timing forced an interruption in the flow of the dancer's movement. Videotape is a valuable tool that we have not used as much as I believe we can. I have done it for myself a couple of times, and I'm not about to show you the tape.
Are there any other observations or comments we can use in the final minutes we have here?
Do you think that sometimes the dancers have added some roughness to the dancing too? The bump and grind and the weave the ring, the Hungarian swing do-si-dos and all. And it makes us feel intimidated to call to what they're dancing. They keep telling us, why don't you call what we're dancing?
Let me make my own observation on that. I believe that most of those dancer gimmicks are traceable to our calling errors. When we leave them extra time, when we overuse forward and back, not to say that we shouldn't use it, but when we overuse it, when we use do-si-do as punctuation marks for our thinking time, dancers fill that time. Look to yourself before you blame it on the dancers.
A step slightly beyond that. If you aren't entertaining them, they'll entertain themselves.
I would just like to... Oh, I thought I couldn't hear myself. I would like to get some observations from some other folks, because I've attended a number of these sessions like similar to this in Smoothness, Callers College, and so on. And one thing I've never heard anyone mention, I hear this all the time on singing calls, and I wonder if I'm the only one who finds swing your corner, Alaman left, new corner, uncomfortable, awkward dancing.
You want to go with that?
I think that can be a very smooth maneuver if it is properly executed and properly taught. In my lessons, I talk many, many times about there are times to twirl the lady after a swing, there are times not to twirl the lady. If the caller is given the command promenade, go ahead and twirl. But the caller with proper timing says swing the corner, Alaman left, new corner. You do not twirl. The gentleman starts his rotation so he's facing the middle of the square, opens up like a book, him being one page of the book, his partner being the other page of the book, opening up like a book, to gently let her go in the direction of the Alaman left while he goes in the direction of the Alaman left. I try to make a joke of it by saying, if you twirl that lady and you head toward your corner, she will be spinning around and you'll get her left fist right in your breadbasket. So that has to be taught to the dancers in lessons, because it can be a smooth sequence. I grant you it does cause problems because dancers don't expect it oftentimes, but it is something that can be taught and can be danced very smoothly.
I would like to make an observation on that I rarely call it because I don't get much dancer success. The few times I call it is when I've gotten my choreography such that they get to the corner too soon and I've got to kill a little extra time. I've always assumed that the lack of dancer success was because at that point the dancers have tuned out. I've gotten through the hard part. All I have to do now is promenade, have fun and promenade home. But you've made me aware that I've got to look, and maybe there's an awkwardness and a body flow problem in that unless they're taught specifically how to get around it.
I think that's a good point, that if you teach your dancers to open up at the right moment, but I think that most dancers, at least at the present time, I refuse to call it because I think most dancers at the present time, if they're not twirling the lady, that if they don't automatically or by instinct or some other means end up with the man facing in the correct direction at the time, it's very awkward for the man to turn and do an Alaman left when he's been spinning clockwise.
But an excellent example of an observed lack of dancer success cause analysis from talking here, we've learned that it's a flow problem.
I will say, too, that I realize that the success rate may not be that great, so oftentimes I will cut the music down hoping that they will say, oh, something's different, we better tune in. So I'll cut the music down so they hear my voice, Alaman left, new corner, given at the proper time. And sometimes that helps.
Unfortunately, as a dancer, I regret the loss, because from the golden days of early square dancing when we all knew how to swing and knew where swings ended, that was a lovely action, because it was, she rolled down your arm, she came to you, already rotating in the right direction for the Alaman left, and it was a smooth flowing, wonderful action. It isn't anymore, because we don't dance that way anymore. Yeah, we need a square. No, we don't need a square. What we need is two couples. Two couples. One of the most miserable losses in all of modern square dancing is the loss of our ability to swing well. What we see is people jumping around when in fact it is a coordinated unitary action where the man and the woman together move as a single unit. Rarely happens anymore. Go, Gregg. Make music. You got to swing your partner around. That won't work. Stop. Unless you both start to swing at the same time, we aren't demonstrating the right thing. Okay, so now would you bow to your partner and your corner and swing with your partner? To the corner, Alaman left. Whoa, that's what's wrong. If you had continued the rotation and let her go rather than stop, you stopped as soon as I said swing the corner, then you let her go and turn back. Yeah, let him take your place. Okay, once again. Bow to your partner and your corner. Swing with your partner. To the corner, Alaman left. That's our problem. We don't establish the amount of time by our timing with how far are they going to go around. That's right.
And I actually swung one more revolution than I normally would, but I was self-consciously trying not to make sure I was not anticipating the call.
Let's see if we can't get it right once. And what we have demonstrated here is that it's not an insignificant action. It's one that needs practice. It needs to be trained. It is, I believe, worth it, but I'm not at all confident that we're going to be able to make it work.
4 minutes left.
Okay, make music. Square through 3/4 round. To the corner, swing. Brand new corner, Alaman left. Okay, I think we got it right.
By Jove, we've done it.
Thank you, Jim. Regarding the awkwardness of the use of a right hand, the gentleman's right hand following courtesy turn. I've heard you allude to it several times up this afternoon. I've been teaching for a great number of years, more than I would care to admit, perhaps. I found after a number of years an easier way. I cheated a little bit. When I would teach the 8 chain through, I would say do a half courtesy turn at the end. You get there by using a right hand to pull by. Join left hands, and as the gentleman's backing up in the normal courtesy turn fashion, put his right hand over the left. There's no hesitation. There's no break in the body movement. It works for me. It may for you.
I like to go under, and that may have to do with relative heights. It depends on which one is most comfortable for you. I think either will accomplish the same purpose.
Well, we're talking about smoothness. I want to how many people have used the pattern in a plus haul, pass through, chase right? Dance the lady's part a couple times. You won't.
We have a lot of calls in square dancing that are inherently unsmooth.
I would like to thank the panel, Gregg and Jim. I'd like to thank those of you that were up here dancing and helping us show and see what's going on. And most of all, I'd like to thank the rest of you that came, or all of us that came and got a chance to work together and look through this. I think we were planning on a working session. It worked out to be that way. I got stuff on it, and I hope you guys enjoyed that type of session. Thanks for coming.